Hey everybody, welcome to F1 or F Off, your audio pit stop for F1 news, interviews, and race reviews. I'm your host Gabe, and once again, we are doing a solo venture by me. Promise this is the last one for a while, so don't worry. My co-host Idris is thankfully stateside again, which is wonderful. He had a great time, as I've heard, and I'm sure we'll hear all about it when he comes back in for the episode, the next episode. But today I'm just going to be flying solo once again, and I'm going to be joined again by LoFi Girl to allow some background ambiance as I chat about the race and what transpired at Qatar. But first, I would like to say, on behalf of the F1F Off podcast, speaking for Idris, I know he will agree with me that both of us, our hearts go out to all of the innocent people that are being held hostage and dying because of this conflict and in Gaza and Israel, between Palestine and the Israelis. It's very heartbreaking to see. It's very shocking to see, to witness. There's just absolutely no need for this, this violence, and it's really terrible, and it's very upsetting, and we really hope that everything comes to a swift and peaceful resolution, and that the bad actors responsible for this are brought to proper justice, and that everybody can find a way to exist in that space comfortably and safely and peacefully, and it's pretty horrific, and we hope for the best, as we continue to do for this, and for also the conflict going on in Ukraine. It's important not to forget that is also still continuing, and we will find a way to end these conflicts with the best possible outcome. That being said, this weekend was the Qatar Grand Prix. It's a track pretty much out in the desert. It has 16 turns. It was designed originally as a MotoGP track. And their first race was in 2021. Max holds the lap record. He set the new record this year at 1 minute 24.319. I was going to kind of go through a whole breakdown of everything that happened, and I'm going to talk to some details about this, obviously, but really the big main thing that I want to talk about with Qatar is that this is a very uncomfortable race to watch, and it was very much uncomfortable for the drivers. There was some really intense heat issues happening. The ambient temperature was so hot, and the drivers were not getting any kind of airflow into their helmets. They were trying to open them up through the straightaway. Alonso apparently had semi-burns after the race. Ocon threw up during lap 15. Obviously, Logan Sargent had to retire early because he had this literally heat stroke. And Albon had to actually go immediately to the hospital as well. This is I will say that if you're really interested in hearing the reasons or the takes for this, that's really important, I would highly suggest that you read friend of the pod, Elizabeth Blackstock, on the Jalopnik website. She has this great article, Why Do So Many People Want to See F1 Drivers Suffer? And honestly, I read through it. It is a very fair point, and it echoes my thoughts about the subject pretty accurately. I think that we're fortunate to live in a time where there have been so many people who have so many people who have essentially suffered and in many cases died for the sake of safety and for the sake of making improvements. Not that it was their intention to do that. It wasn't a self-sacrifice. It was just unfortunate result of circumstances surrounding the racing that resulted in their death that then were changed. And, you know, extreme heat and extreme environment is not, it's not something to be ignored. You know, it's not like a team created problem, but it is a problem, and it's one that really cannot be controlled. And unfortunately, because of climate change, it's going to get ever worse. It's not going to get any better. And so it's important that we think about this going into the future, because Qatar has apparently come under contract for the next 10 years. And we cannot continue to be having races where drivers are literally passing out at the wheel before they can finish. There's this sentiment that people are putting out there that, you know, drivers are gladiators, or they are, you know, some sort of superheroes that need to, you know, rise to face the challenge. And it's like, no. I don't agree with that at all. I don't think anybody should be categorized as a gladiator. I think this sort of glamorizing of pain and suffering is dangerous. And Elizabeth does a very great job of pointing out multiple instances. Martin Brundle had a really piss poor take on this, where he was, you know, saying that they're heroes because they're suffering these conditions and it's good for the sport. And it's like, no. Because if somebody is passing out at the wheel, I mean, we saw what happened when Felipe Massa got hit with the spring and just like went flying into a wall. You know what I mean? It could cause possible death of not only the driver, but marshals, you know, on the side of the track, fans in the grandstands. Like, they could endanger other drivers around them who are not passing out, that don't realize that they are. They could be careening into them, not hitting the braking zone. It is dangerous. It is hugely dangerous. And I'm sorry, but if you don't think it's dangerous, you really have to re-examine your priorities about watching this sport. And I don't have any gripes about saying that, because seriously, like, this is entertainment, but we are not supposed to be watching drivers be put in physically dangerous instances for the sake of our entertainment. Like, that's why I think calling somebody a gladiator, calling them gladiators, is kind of gross. Because the idea that, like, witnessing people die for your entertainment is, like, that's despicable. So that being said, hopefully, I did read that the FIA is going to be looking at sort of its policies surrounding this. I would say that there should be a threshold for ambient temperature, that if you know, if the temperature is at above a certain degree temperature, whether it be track or just ambient environment, then they should postpone the race, or potentially maybe have some other provisions, like required pit stops for, you know, breaks, you know, maybe driver changes. I mean, you know, you look at Elizabeth brings up Le Mans, how in racing in Le Mans you have to swap drivers every so often because of its safety thing. Obviously, nobody can drive for 24 hours straight, and so you need to have drivers who are refreshed, they're hydrated, they're rested, they're, you know, limbered up, ready to go. You know, I would say that for these really hot races, if we're going to continue to do this, I think that there maybe there should be a mandatory driver change for these races, which seems wild. Believe me, it does. It seems pretty crazy, but like, I could imagine a scenario where the reserve drivers begin, you know, and do a swap in between. I mean, obviously, like, you know, if somebody crashes, then that sucks for the other driver and everything like that. but there just has to be some sort of way to change this, because we cannot just subject this one driver, these single drivers to this. You know, maybe we just do, instead of one full Grand Prix, maybe we do a series of heats, which, you know, pun intended, but not completely intended, because I mean, they got through the sprint okay. It was probably difficult, but they got through it because it was only like 19 laps or whatever. You know, how about they just split the Grand Prix in half? You know, you do a one heat race, and then you crown a winner from that, and you divvy up half points, and then you do a reset. You know, then it gives a chance to maybe do a reverse grid, try something, you know, just to give the drivers a chance to rehydrate, to relax again, to reset, and possibly go out again. You know, maybe let the ambient temperature go down as it gets later. There's lots of different solutions that I think we could try for this, but yeah, I would say it's something that needs to be fixed. That being said, Max won his drivers championship, third championship. So congrats to Max. I will say, I definitely think it's deserved. I mean, he's an incredibly talented driver, a totally trained, talented guy. I'm not sure about his motivations. I'm not sure about how he acts under pressure and when things are not going his way. I feel that there are times where Max kind of gives me sort of a blasé, kind of like, it is what it is kind of feel, which is not it's not the best thing to see. Just, you know, you want to see people who are like really intensely passionate about a thing, and just like, you know, you love to see those moments of complete emotion just erupt when things happen. And I know Max is capable of that, but I think he's just sort of going through the motions. I mean, even when Hamilton won his like 8th championship, he was still crying. You know, he was still just really emotional in the car. But in any case, he won it in the sprint race, which is, you know, mathematically possible. And that's, I think, the case, you know, that's what happens when you have, you know, sprint races, that these things sort of happen. I feel like I'm still sort of, the jury's still out with me in sprint races. I'm still, my opinion ebbs and flows. The sprint race we had was pretty exciting. There were like 3 safety car interventions. But I don't necessarily think that that's a catalyst for a good race. I feel like it's just, you know, a circumstance of things that happen. Checo, kind of a shifting gears here to Red Bull really quick. Apparently Red Bull is planning on having a sit down with Perez and sort of a conversation about, you know, what they're going to do as far as his career and things of that nature. It's still, like I've said before, very disappointing to see. You know, there's a lot of discourse about Perez versus the teammates of other world championship winning drivers, and, you know, you can say what you will, you can make your, you know, thoughts known and things of that nature, but I think that he is just in a very strange state mentally. I think he's ready to just get this race done with. I think he's ready, or this season rather, over with. I think he's mentally prepared to check out. You know, it's really difficult. I mean, Christian Horner said, he told reporters, I quote, "I think we really need to sit down with Checo because we know what he's capable of, and he's not hitting that form at the moment. We desperately need him to find that form to keep this second place in the championship." So, will Max help him this time? You know, I don't know, because last year he didn't really care at all. He was just like, whatever, you know, he knows what he did or whatever. So I don't even know, you know, I don't know if this is going to make any difference. I don't know, you know, if he's really going to, whatever talk is going to actually change the way that he drives. I mean, it's tough to say. But I think that if Red Bull decides to just pull the plug on Perez, even though they signed a new contract with him, if they decide to breach that contract or pay it out and just go with somebody else, I can't help but feel like they're just once again just going to be shown to be a very unorganized, sort of just compulsion driven, like compulsory, team, just like reactive. One thing I will say that's a positive, we haven't heard from Helmut Marko in a while, so good for them for putting that guy in the closet a little bit and just keeping him quiet, because we don't need to hear it anymore from that. Well, speaking of people acting out, though, Fufo fam, we need to talk about Stroll. At this point, I don't really know what else to say that I have not already said a million times. So he got knocked out in qualifying again in Q3 or Q1 again, and he decides to throw a little bit of a hissy fit. Now, here's the thing. I've seen a lot of discourse on this as well. People are saying, well, Max pushed Ocon, and Michael Schumacher went over and shouted at David Coulthard, and, sent a punch to guy, and, he punched Irvine, and, there was all this, here's the difference that I want people to really think about. Well, at least maybe not with Max, but with most of those other situations that I'm seeing. These were people who were competing for world championships. Okay. So you talk about the pressure on a driver, and it's very applicable and it's valid. However, if you are in the middle of a championship fight, that is an exponential increase in stress level and pressure. I'm not making excuses for the other drivers who have done this, okay? Because I think even most of them also had to deal with backlash or punishment over it, and of course people are like, oh, well, they're hot-headed drivers, and they're at the top of their game, and they're just thoroughbreds, but don't give me that line. Drivers there are literally hundreds and hundreds of drivers that have driven in this sport, that have driven under a lot of pressure and have had bad days, that have not reacted that poorly. And Lance Stroll is not in contention for the championship. I mean, his team is fighting, is barely scraping to fight for the 4th position finish in the Constructors' Championship, because Lance has not been able to produce results that have won points. He has not been able to keep up with his teammate. And sure, there have been some mechanical issues and some bad luck that has kind of stopped it, but he has also contributed to that. He had plenty of opportunities to be able to, compete alongside his teammate, and just hasn't. And here's the thing. I think a lot of the discord that I hear about this, or a lot of the discussions that I hear about this, people they're giving Lance excuses like he's a rookie. This is his 7th season in the sport. This is it's technically his 2nd team, but kind of his 3rd, because Racing Point sort of switched with Force India. And after 7 seasons, you should know this stuff. You should know how to be able to find the pace that you need. And the car's capable. Fernando proves that time and time again. I mean, yeah, he's a 2-time world champion, and he's been in the sport, for, a really, really long time. But Stroll has not, it's not like Stroll is a rookie. It's not like this is the first race that he's done. It's not that he's driving a car that's not capable of being in the points. It's 100% is. It's not like he hasn't had the resources, not like he hasn't had the backing. It's not like he is being sabotaged by his teammate. The excuses that he can make are very far few and in between. He can't blame the team. He can't blame the drivers. He has to look inward at himself and try and figure out what he could be doing that's better. And after the qualifying, he threw his steering wheel, which we've seen drivers do, but not like necessarily in the garage. I mean, okay, whatever, you're frustrated, I get it. And then he gets out, he shoves his, instructor away, and then he apparently shoved somebody else violently behind the wall of the garage. And it doesn't matter who you are. It's unacceptable. I mean, and I'll tell you, if Fernando Alonso did that, I'd be like, what the hell, dude? Like, what are you doing? Like, I would be concerned if Hamilton did it. I would be shocked. I'd be like, what the hell? What are you doing? It's not a reasonable response. Like, you can blame adrenaline. It's like, how many people undergo, like, how many of these drivers get out of their car pumped up on adrenaline after a hard, difficult race and shove somebody else? Like, I've seen drivers throw their gloves at walls. I've seen them take them out on their helmets, maybe some inanimate objects, but like, don't be attacking people, don't be pushing people. And then what does he do? He goes and does this interview where he says like a total of 6 words, and he's just really combative and just like dismissive, and just, it was not a good look. And I think that we're really starting to see the cracks in the armor of Lance Stroll, in a sense that people want to like him and they try, and he's not giving them good reasons to do it. I've never looked at Lance Stroll and thought, oh, like, this is, a person that's like, got all their, ducks in a row and they're doing good and they're going to be future world champion. I've never seen him do anything that's really impressed me in that way. There have been plenty of his colleagues that have been in driving way less and have done way more with the time that they have. And so I can't. And apparently the FIA is also not happy about it. They're investigating potential violation of rules of conduct in his kind of garage tirade. And if this is what if this is a wake-up call for him in that sense, like, I think it's only fair. Max got reprimanded when he pushed Ocon. He got in trouble for that. Like, why is it that he can't? Like, I don't like that they're making excuses. I don't like that there's like, oh, well, he's a driver and he's got a lot of adrenaline and blah. That's not enough. That's not enough for me. I think that he is taking up a seat that somebody else could easily be thriving in and be having a really, really great career advancing. And he needs to get it together, find some pace, find some results, or he's just got to bail. There's really nothing else that I can say on that subject. But anyway, yeah. So Qatar, interesting race finale, very controversial in ways that we don't want to see. I really don't want to see people skirting this under the table like it's not a thing. We really need to think about this, because we're really putting drivers at risk. And if you're pushing drivers to an extent to where they're shoving their shoving their people around, and they're getting that hot, we got to figure it out. On some interesting news, Pirelli is apparently going to be F1's continued exclusive supplier until at least 2027 of tires. Now, to be fair, I've only ever seen Pirelli ever since I started watching the sport. So the idea of a new manufacturer coming in kind of would be sort of an interesting thing. Like, I would be interested to see it, but at the other hand, I'm sort of thinking that when it comes to tires and tire companies, we've seen a lot of issues that have happened in the past when you have two competing tire compounds or tire companies, trying to compete for their spot in a sport, and teams choosing between the others. It doesn't all often end well. NASCAR famously had a conflict between Hoosier and Goodyear in the 80s, I believe, and that did not necessarily end that well. There's a lot of speculation on like whose tires were causing problems and death of drivers, and the mix up, some being better on some tracks than the other. It adds an element that feels doesn't feel consistent in this way that would be beneficial. I think the fact that Pirelli, as a sole manufacturer providing all the tires for everybody, I mean, IndyCar does the same thing. I think that there's such an important aspect. They are literally the most important aspect of a car. They're literally where the rubber hits the road. If you don't have the tires, you do not go racing. I think that it's very important that they're consistent, and I think that it evens the playing field in the sense that that's one element that the teams don't have to worry about. They're not developing their own tires. The tires are very closely regulated and sort of restricted, and that I think that it makes it easier for the teams in many ways to figure out the performance that they need to extract from their car, rather than have to worry about how they're going to improve the tire. I think that Pirelli has definitely had some ups and downs. There was a problem at the British Grand Prix, I think 2012, I believe, memory serves right, where the tires were just exploding. There were multiple punctures, and there was a problem with the sidewalls, and it was pretty intense to watch. Just so many people were just having punctures happening. We also got a little bit here in Qatar where the tires were having issues on track, and they had to actually move one of the corners, and they were degrading, and so they had to restrict the race to having only 18 laps for the tires. And that actually brings me to something I do want to talk about here with the Qatar, apart from the weather. The other thing that was very wild and very kind of uncomfortable about this race was the fact that there were so many off-track violations and track limit problems. I do think that Tiernan and I were talking about this, that I do think that there has to be a limit somewhere where you cannot go past. You have to be within the track. I mean, it's only fair. That's the point of it. I know some people feel kind of loosey-goosey about it, and I understand the idea that you have the rules in place and then you try and circumvent those rules in order to see what you can get away with. I mean, I get that, but at the same time, it's we can't all just benefit off of the Gran Turismo mentality of cutting across the grass to pass the car ahead of us in order to win and force them off the track. This is a very serious sport that involves a lot of money, and I think that it's only fair that the teams abide by a certain rules, certain levels of rules and codes of conduct that they have to adhere by. And I think a track limits is a perfectly acceptable baseline of rule. But that being said, I think that it is once again a problem that needs to be solved, because if you have a problem with track limit violations, you either have issues where you need to readjust the track to where the drivers have more of an area to cover as they go around, or you implement a penalty that is fair but does not slow down everything. Now, at this race, they gave the drivers, I think, four attempts before they get a black and white flag, and then on the 5th attempt, it was a time penalty. And of course, during qualifying, they were getting their laps deleted. Now, I think that for the race, I would say that's fair enough. However, I think that it would just be easier to just add time onto the end of their result, and then just see how it, works out that way. I'm sure there's lots of drivers and strategists who would try and figure out how many times can you do this to be, but I think the math would be too crazy, and it's too unpredictable about whether or not a driver is going to be accruing more points or not. So I would say it's worth looking at. I do think that for qualifying, they should add, maybe 3/10 to their lap or 5/10 to their lap if they, breach the track limit. I don't think it should be deleted outright, because I think if it's deleted outright, then they got to start all over, and there's a lot of work that goes into building up to that point. I think the argument is that there's plenty of drivers who don't have that problem, and so everybody should be by that rule. But, here's the thing. It's just like, it's also at the same time, you have to balance that. Like, this is entertainment. It's what people want to watch. If somebody makes a mistake and they go off, even though it would have been a perfectly acceptable lap if they were just an inch to the right, I think that there should be some leeway to where it doesn't completely destroy a driver's qualifying, but it definitely does dox them. Like if you add 5/10 on top during a qualifying lap, that could be a lot, but that might still keep you in Q2, or get you out of Q1 or get you out of Q2. It might be just enough to still do that, but you're not all the way at the top. So I think it's something that's a continuing conversation that we need to think about and worry about, and I think eventually we'll come to a consensus about it, but who knows? It's weird after this Qatar Grand Prix. I'm almost at this point. I'm ready for the season to end, not because I'm bored, but because I feel like these drivers really just we need like a hard reset. I think like the drivers need to get their vacation, they need to get their training, they need to get their heads back in the game, they get everything right. We're at this point where there's just so much drama happening and just so much like wild things. I mean, the two Mercedes having that issue, which, by the way, I definitely knew it was Hamilton's fault when I witnessed it, and it was nice to see that he admitted that and apologized to Russell. I think that was the right move. But yeah, regardless, I think we're really starting to get to the end. We're getting a little burned out here. I'm looking forward to Austin because it's a great race. I'm not looking forward to Vegas because I think it's just going to be, it's not really going to be a very interesting spectacle. It's either going to completely crash and burn, or it's going to be so weird and controversial, or something's going to happen, crazy's going to happen, that it's going to, cause problems. But I guess we'll see how the, wealthy rich fest happens. But anyway, yeah, that's going to be all for me today, folks. Like I said, Idris is going to be back to co-host with me this coming weekend. So we'll be back in full form. I really, really appreciate you guys listening to me in my little solo adventures. I've been having some pretty tricky times recently, just a lot of stuff going on, a lot of changes, as I mentioned before. And, it's just, it's a lot of mental work to go into putting a podcast together, and especially if you have to go it alone, scheduling conflicts and things of that nature, things come up, but yeah, I'm still happy to do it. I'm so glad that everybody listens, and I really appreciate it. So thanks for listening. You can find the podcast anywhere you listen to your podcast, anywhere you get them. If you want to contact us, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, X, and at F1 or F off. You can also email us at F1 or F off podcast @gmail.com. Please give us a 5-star review anywhere you listen to your podcast. It helps out a lot. really good to know. Share it with your family and friends or anybody that you come across that's into motorsport. You know, and honestly too, somebody was asking me, you know, where should I listen? What should I start? And I tell people, you know, you can start at the beginning, because we do a little bit of a breakdown and history of F1 and talk about a lot of the stuff that builds up to it. If you want a good IndyCar primer, listen to our episode with Elizabeth. That one, we give a lot of good info on that, and it's a good, really good overall episode. But anywhere, honestly, if you want to jump in, you can jump in anywhere. It's all there. So thanks once again for LoFi Girl for providing the music. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from people. And I guess you'll hear from us next week. So thanks.